Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Build Computers. I'm doing a good old-fashioned computer build today. It's not a massively excited one. This is going to be a productivity computer. So it's essentially a supercharged office box. We're not putting a graphics card in this one. Instead, I've got a new Ryzen 5600G to go into this computer. So this stemmed from a customer who wanted a powerful desktop PC for running multiple operating systems and just general productivity work. So we wanted to put in a decent CPU, and I'm like, well, you're going to go Ryzen with that because that's where it's at right now. But the problem with Ryzen is that you need a graphics card. Now, on a gaming computer, obviously no big deal. But on an office computer, you don't really want to drop, well, in the current market, a couple of £100 minimum into a graphics card that is not going to get used. So therein lied the question. And just as I was sort of thinking, well, I guess maybe it's more sensible to go Intel for this one, lo and behold, AMD delivered with the new Ryzen 5000G series CPUs. So Ryzen 5600G, which has got integrated graphics. And those integrated graphics apparently are not too shabby either. So it's integrated graphics that are actually usable in a pinch as well. The Intel integrated graphics would have been good enough. So an i5 11600K would also have been a good choice for this build. And probably cost about the same amount as well. And that would have been an entirely acceptable alternative to this. However, the 5600G does have better graphics overall, so considering the costs are about the same, it makes sense to go with the AMD on this one. Plus it means that we can use existing stuff that I've already got lying around. Speaking of which, there's supposed to be a motherboard there. Done. Right, so I'm going to put all of this in there. Let's rearrange the desk and get to building. So as usual when I'm doing a computer build, I'm going to start by unboxing everything because there's always a lot of packaging when you're building a computer. So I strongly advise unboxing everything in advance so you can get exactly what you need to do the build, no more no less. I don't need any of that. That can all stay in the boxes for now. I usually collect up all of the extra fittings and bits and pieces afterwards. So I can give them to the customer or put them in another box or something like that. But that can wait for now. For the actual build, I just want the main components. So the motherboard I've selected is this B550 Aorus Elite AX V2. Now the V2 is the important bit because Gigabyte often do the second versions of their boards. And the V2s often have I don't know the exact list of improvements, but I'm told that there is a decent number of extra improvements they make on the V2s, including better VRMs, BIOS fixes, various other improvements, essentially just anything that was wrong with the version 1. So this board came in at very good value. I paid about £130 for it, which for a mid-range B550 board is pretty decent. I've previously been expecting to pay approximately. I've previously been expecting to pay like 150 to 106, 150, 160 pounds, that kind of money for a decent motherboard. So the fact that we can get good B550 motherboards, with a Type C connector on them and everything, for 130, that's really good. I also like the way it's only got 4 SATA ports, but like, come on, man, who needs more than that? I like the way they've put 2 of them up here next to the ATX connector though, because that means in cable tidying, if you do have a hard drive in there, you can just have that SATA cable just go out with your ATX lead, and it just keeps the cable tidying handy. Whereas SATA ports tend to be down here where they're difficult to get to and difficult to conceal. So that's the motherboard. Then I've also got SSD is going to be this Samsung 970 Evo Plus. We've got it in 1 terabyte, so I'm going to stick that in there in a moment. So not the best bang for buck SSD around, however, a strong, fast SSD with good warranty and endurance on it, which again, for the build we're doing here, a productivity build, where the SSD is likely to take a lot of work, I spec'd up for a Samsung here. CPU, as aforementioned, Ryzen 5600G. So this comes with, if I can get the box open, this comes with what I'm assuming will be a Wraith Stealth cooler. So there's our CPU and... that a Spire or a Stealth? Yeah, that's the Wraith Stealth. It's the little baby one. Now, the Wraith Stealth, I don't know how much... I don't know if the 5600 runs cooler or hotter than the 3600 in any meaningful way. However, for the 3600, so the predecessor to this chip, the Wraith Stealth that it came with was barely enough. You could get away with a Wraith Stealth that came in the box, but like you don't want it sitting at 100% load with that cooler. So it was like you can, but you shouldn't kind of thing. So I'm guessing it's going to be the same deal with this one. So for that reason, I've got this Wraith Max. This Wraith Prism, which is the RGB one kicking around. Now, because this is a productivity rig that I want to pass the wedding test, and I'll tell you what that is in a moment, I have disabled the RGB on this cooler. So this is a Wraith Prism, but it's not going to light up because I'm doing not so much a blackout, but a professional looking computer here. So I've gone no RGB. So yeah, however, because this guy is much, much bigger with the heat pipes and the copper base, this is going to be absolutely fine on that 5600G. So that's our cooling. Then RAM, not terribly exciting, but solid enough. I got some Corsair Vengeance LPX. This is a 3600 kit. I think it's only C18. Let's see. Yeah, it's only C18, so it's not blazing fast, but 3600, again, it's not going to be a bottleneck is the important thing. So, decent amount of memory in there, nice and quick. Then powering the show, I've got this Be Quiet System Power 9 600 watts. So this is not a terribly exciting power supply. I picked a couple of these up on sale a while back, which is why I'm using it up in this build now. It's a shame that this power supply is not semi-modular. That's the big downfall of the System Power 9. However, 600 watts, 80 plus bronze, and it's made by Be Quiet. It's going to be a solid power unit that will be absolutely fine with this CPU and will also mean that the customer, they could drop in a modest graphics card later on down the line. You wouldn't want to put like a 3080 or something like that on this power supply. However, you know, up to and including a 3070, you'll be fine. So decent power supply that'll run whatever they're going to want to put in this thing later on down the line. So let's get this thing out the box as well. Power supply, so fully cabled. However, as you can see, it's got nice cables on it. They're braided, they're nice black wires, nice power supply. So the case I've got here, this is a Fractal Meshify C. And this is a case that I've been threatening to review for a very long time. But every time I've come to actually buy one to build in it, I've just ended up buying something else. And Fractal cases are fantastic. But the problem is that they're also kind of boring, depending on your point of view. This is a very professional looking case. I mentioned earlier on, it passes what I call the wedding test. Now let's take a time out for a sec while I explain that. The wedding test I came up with when talking about cars, because there's lots of cars that I would look at a show and be like, that's really cool, but you wouldn't want to own it. Or it's really cool, but you'd feel a bit embarrassed if you pulled up at a wedding in that car. You know, like if you take a BMW M3, you can show up at a wedding in that car and you look cool and professional. Whereas if you've got like a modified, if you've got a modified Subaru in garish orange with a loud exhaust and you show up at the wedding, you don't quite look as clever as you probably think you are. Now, don't get me wrong, I own a Subaru. However, you see what I mean? It's a question of what looks professional. Now, with computers, you can do the same thing with laptops. You go to a business conference, you pull out a Dell XPS, you look professional and slick and well equipped. You go to a business conference and you pull out like a classic Asus Republic of Gamers with the stupid I logo on it and all of the RGB dance on. You don't quite look as slick as the guy with the XPS looks. You see what I mean? So that's the problem. Does it pass a professionalism test? And obviously that's very subjective. But the Fractal passes the wedding test, whereas the Corsair 220T on the default Rainbow Puke RGB settings doesn't pass the wedding test. So it depends on what you're building for as to which you want. Now, I'm building a productivity computer here. So I'm giving that to a professional client and they're expecting a professional looking computer, which is why we're building with no RGB. If this was a gaming computer, I'd absolutely want to put RGB on it. So with that much being said though, let's build up in this computer and we'll just, I'll tell you about it as I go basically. So we've got a couple of fans there. I'm going to relocate these fans. I want to do a modest airflow setup on this. So I'm going to we've got airflow at the back and an airflow at the front. I'm going to move this one to the front. So we've got two 120mm intakes and I've got a couple of spare 120mm fans that came with a Corsair case that I'm going to stick up the top. So we've got a front in, top out airflow design. Now, personally, I would go for a rear exhaust most of the time, but I actually spoke to the customer about this. They said they were putting it in an enclosed space where there's more room above the computer than there is behind it. So for best cooling and airflow, it makes sense to go for a top exhaust, not a rear exhaust. So we're going to adjust the fans to reflect that. So let's see. We need to put some standoffs in this thing as well. So let's dig into the box of tricks and get the standoffs out. Standoffs, that's what I want. More screws. Is that a lint-free cloth? Oh, a special cleaning cloth. That's very tasty. Let's put some standoffs in this. I like that this case has also come with a standoff driver. So there's that little widget with a Phillips screw head that fits over the top of the standoff, so you can screw them in. I will immediately lose this once I've used it. I'm going to keep that and I will use it in the future, and I will lose it. However, we can use it at least once. So the motherboard, let's grab that. So the motherboard has the standard 9-screw layout. So as you can see, all the screw holes are in alignment, so we can put all of the standoffs in alignment as well. Some motherboards have got a screw that's in a weird location, so just watch out for that. There we go, and of course the center standoff is pre-fitted and it has the little nub on it, which means it sticks up into the motherboard, so the motherboard clicks into place. So we'll just put that guy in now. I love it when cases have this little standoff in them. Most of them do these days. If you're buying any kind of premium brand, it's just the cheapo brands that are missing it. It's a really nice touch. There we go. This motherboard has a built-in I/O shield as well, which is also very nice. I'm very glad that that has become more or less standard issue on everything. Because I/O shields have always been kind of gross to click into cases and you lose them and stuff like that. So built-in I/O shields, best thing to happen in recent history with motherboards. And these standoffs are metric thread, so they're M3. I should have really built up the motherboard before I put it in the case, but I always forget to do that. Doesn't make a massive difference, to be honest. It's mainly just when we come to put the CPU cooler on that will be slightly more awkward, but it's fine, really. There's our M.2 drive. There's our CPU, which I shall carefully hold by the edges. Triangle points to the top left of the board. And in it goes. I'll stick in the RAM and then we'll put the cooler on top of that. And we're going to use the 2nd and 4th slots for the memory. Whoops, which needs to go that way around. And you can tell which slots you need to use because on the vast majority of motherboards these days, if you look on the silk screen, which is the writing on the motherboard, as you can see, it actually says first there next to A2 and B2, which means you populate those two slots first. And that's pretty much standard on all motherboards these days. Then we'll paste on. Oh, has this tube run out? Nope. There it goes. There we go. I always draw an X on there. That looks like a big old thick pile of goop. It's actually very flat. The camera's deceiving. I'll show this in the edit for once. However, I'll tell you now, I often don't show people thermal paste because I'm, like with a lot of channels that do computer builds and stuff like that, sick and tired of arguing with people in the comments over correct application of thermal paste. So yeah, you can tell me you're wrong if you want. I won't listen because this is how I've always done it and it works. Whoop. Right, let's get that guy on and just align the clips on each side. I like the Wraith Prism, but I wish they'd put on a 4-screw mounting system like the rest of the Wraith coolers have, because the 2-point hold down clip, it's not great. It works, it's just not great. All right, flip that locking lever over. There we go, and just make sure that's on properly. CPU fan connected. There we go. Right, so next we're going to get a power supply fitted to this and get all of this wired up. So the Meshify C has got these nice big grommet holes all around. So we've got really good access for cable holes. So to mount up the power supply on this one, we've got a bracket on the back, which needs to be removed. I'm not a fan of these brackets because they're awkward to fit. We've got to unscrew this from the back and then screw it onto the back of our power supply and then slide the whole shebang into the back of the case. I prefer cases where they've just simply made the power supply enclosure tall enough that you can just fit the power supply in. But it's not a deal breaker. This case kind of makes up for this by virtue of the fact that A, they've made that power supply enclosure only as tall as it needs to be, but also the bottom vent for this is actually accessible from the front. The whole thing just slides out like that, which is a really nice touch on Fractal cases, and it actually means that there's half a chance of it getting cleaned. Although that much being said, they're a little bit... There we go. And it goes. So yeah, it swings and roundabouts with this one. I like both designs. I'll take the 4 designated power supply screws. They call them power supply screws, but they are, at the end of the day, they're just Imperial screws. But interestingly, this case uses... it does have Imperials on the PCI plates as well. It's unusual. It didn't come with any spare Imperial screws, so I just kind of assumed they'd used metric for literally everything else. But yeah, that seems to be a choice. It's one of the most frustrating parts about computer building, in my opinion, the fact that we still use a mix of Imperial and metric. Just pick one or the other, man. I don't care which. Just pick one or the other. Preferably metric, because it makes sense. And I've said it often, but I'll say it again. Yes, I mount the power supply fan side up because it means that the ambient air can rise out of it and the fan has to do less work. It also means that there's just another fan that's just exhausting a bit of hot air out from under where the graphics card would normally be, which is helping out the graphics card a bit. The power supply doesn't care about sucking in a little bit of warm air. it doesn't produce that much heat to be of any concern whatsoever. So that's exhausting, that's intaking from inside the case and blowing out of the rear. So I'm aware of the irony of praising this case for having a good bottom vent and then completely not using it, but you can build your computer however you like. Let's attach the 24 pin. That's going to go through there. We need a 4+4 8-pin for the CPU. That's going to go up there. Poke straight in, very nice. You'd be surprised how many cases you can't do that on and you have to split the pins to get them to fit through the hole. And let's see. I'm going to separate out the... We're not going to use the PCI Express power cable because we've got no graphics card going into this. However, I am going to separate it out and I'm going to leave it accessible outside of all of the cable tidying. So if a graphics card is put into this at a later date, whoever fits that graphics card has got the cable right there ready to go. So we don't have any hard drives going into this or anything else. So we don't actually need any of the SATA or Molex power. And that is a second graphics card chain. So that lot I'm going to wrap back up in the cable tie, which I've just thrown somewhere else. And I will stuff that back in behind the power supply. There we go. I have no idea why they still make these 24-pin ATX cables with the 4-pin split. Must be for tooling reasons or something like that, or maybe just because of standards. But like, who the hell is buying brand new power supplies for 20-pin ATX boards? I'll lay this down for a sec while I fit this cable, because this is a stiff boy, and when plugging this in properly, I want to make sure that I can get my fingers underneath that board to stop the motherboard from flexing as I push it in. Because if I just push down on that real hard, I could have a really bad day when I break the motherboard. Right, I heard a distinctive click there, and the locking lever is closed, and fingernail test. Can't get my fingernail between the connector and the plug. So that's how you know it's in properly. If you can get your fingernail between the connector and the plug, it's not in. Okay, right. Possible problem here. Wah, 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 wah. Okay, what about the other one over here? Nope. Oh, you were doing so well, Fractal. Now, I think it will fit through there if the motherboard isn't fitted. I've also missed a screw on the motherboard there. That's a thing. So if I poke... What I'm going to do, I'm going to take the screws out, ease the motherboard out of place so I can thread that cable through, then screw it back in again. And I think we'll just manage to get through there, but that's not terribly good. Plenty of other cases allow me to fit through that hole while the motherboard is in. So again, one of those times where lack of testing. I seem to say this so often, but it just feels like these things aren't tested. I thought this would be the case. I thought this would be the case where I would not find any issues like that with it. I feel like anyone who has a prototype of this in a development factory while building a computer in it would say, hey, once the motherboard is in, there really isn't a lot of space to fit the front panel headers through the holes at the bottom. Oh, I needed it to be the other way up. I think I can make this work. Just give myself plenty of excess. And I cannot wait for this connector to die. It's coming. Roll on Type-C. Although the Type-C connector isn't free from criticism either, because it only has one port per connector. It was so easy with USB 2. It was so easy. So for front panel connectors, we start with the hard drive light in the bottom left. Positive on the left, negative on the right. Then power LED goes in the top left. Again, positive on the left, negative on the right. Then our reset switch goes at the bottom row, either way up, not polarized, and power switch goes above that. So we've just occupied that block on the left there. And that's basically standard with all motherboards these days. There we go. Not a lot of wires to sort back there. Nice and easy. We can just put all of those back in these Velcro ties and that's done. Okay, I'm going to get the front fans sorted out now so I can get those plumbed in, I think. So to remove the front panel from this thing, I'm guessing we just pull it off, which is normally how it works. So I'll take that front slide out and just give this a pull. There we go. And okay, the front panel is coming with it. Looks like the front panel does actually come apart in several layers by some means, but I'm not sure how. But for now, I think I'm going to lay the computer down on its side so this can just swivel upwards, and that'll give me the access I need to the front fans. So as with most of the airflow cases, you can fit 3 120mm fans down the front. This one looks like it'll also actually take 3 140mm fans as well, I think. No, I think 2 140s or 3 120s. However, 2 is always plenty good enough. If you want to fit the third, you'll need to remove this cover here. There's a plastic insert that comes out, and that gives you enough room at the front to then fit in an extra fan and a 360mm radiator, should one seek to. However, I think 2 fans is plenty enough up the front, so it's actually how I set up these cases most of the time, unless the fans are all very prominently on show up the front, and I want to have that 3-fan aesthetic, you know? But fun fact, when I'm setting up Corsair 220T cases, I actually take the lowest fan from the front and move it to the back, because I think that looks nicer. Dear motherboard designers, please stop putting system fan headers here. I know you want this fan to plug into it, but that's really awful, because you could just put one up here, and then you could put all the rest down these sides of the motherboards, you know, where all the fans actually want to go to. This is terrible. This is useless. It's annoying. At best, make that the CPU fan. I'll accept that. But otherwise, this is annoying. Stop doing this. Right, because the fan headers are in annoying places, and we don't actually have that many of them on this board, we've got 3 system fan headers and 2 CPU fan headers. So 5 fan headers overall isn't bad, but obviously 2 of them are for the CPU, which is, you know, not very useful in this instance. And I've got 4 system fans, so I'm going to get a couple of fan splitters. It's a shame I only have 1 double fan splitter, The only other ones I've got are triple boys, but to be honest, these fan splitters, when you buy them in bulk, well, I say bulk, if you buy them in packs of like 5 or 6 from AliExpress, they work out at like £1 each, maybe £1.50. They're really not expensive. They don't eat into your profit margin in any meaningful way. So just get splitters. It makes your life so much easier and you get a much better finish out of them. There we go. That will do nicely. So we've got a big old chasm here where the graphics card should go. However, despite not having a graphics card there, that looks really smart. I like the look out of that. That looks really slick and modern to me. I'm quite happy. Just for argument's sake, and just so you guys can see what this thing would look like as a gaming rig, let's just take off a couple of blanking plates and I'll stick my 1660 Ti in here and just show you what that looks like. Whoop. Haven't quite got the length on this wire to go all the way around without using the extension, which is a pity. But that's not the end of the world. The nice thing about this case, though, is being fairly compact. I mean, it's not a small card, this 1660 Ti, but it's not enormous either. But even a modestly sized graphics card like this fills out the case nicely. Whereas if you get a big boy case, anything that's not a big boy graphics card kind of looks a bit small and weedy in there, which is another reason why I like these compact cases. They're easier to fill out and bulk out a little bit, and it avoids having that small card syndrome in there, Anyway, let's plug this in and see how it runs. I'll leave the card in there because I can, but as I mentioned, it'll be coming out for delivery anyway. There we go. My graphics card is ruining my blackout look, but that DRGBing of the prism was worked a treat. This motherboard doesn't have diagnostic LEDs. That's a heckin' fail. Really? A B550 with flashback but no diagnostic LEDs. Alright, if you say so. Right. Oh, there it goes. I thought it wasn't going to post then. BIOS has been reset. Please reconfigure your BIOS. Okay. Bam. Right. Load optimized defaults and then boot. Now we'll enter the BIOS. Thank you. There we go. Ryzen 5 5600G with Radeon graphics, 16 gigs of RAM. So we're going to want some XMP on that RAM. So let's turn that on. Let's see. And have we got all of our fans there? Not recognizing any of the system fans as being connected. I think I might know the reason for that. Right, let's get some XMP. And let's save and exit. That's a really long post time that we've got here. I'm not happy with how long this thing takes to post. It probably wants a BIOS update because it's a brand new CPU. It doesn't need the BIOS update to run it, but I have a suspicion it would probably work better with a BIOS update. There we go, that's better. Didn't have them plugged in properly. Right, let's set those to silent. And sysfan 3 can be on silent as well. And let's escape on that. There we go. Now we've got all the fans reporting properly. So that's fine. Okay, let's save and exit setup. And let's just see how long it takes to post this time. I think I'm going to BIOS update this anyway. It's just a question on whether I do that. Well, yeah, I'll do that on camera. Why not? You guys are here to see how you build computers, right? So, yeah, what's the point in saying, oh, all of these slight issues that you might face on a new build, I'll fix all of those off camera. Okay, there we go. That post time was acceptable. So after a couple of reboots, this thing seems to have got its act together and is now happy. But I'm going to BIOS update it anyway. So let's hit up the Gigabyte website, get the latest BIOS for this motherboard, and we'll give it a flash. Okay, Gigabyte B550 Aorus Elite, yep, V2. Pachow. Do I have a Rev 1.0 or not? Yes, I do have a Rev 1.0. Make sure you check, because the BIOS will likely be different if there is a Rev 2. Let's see. Downloads. BIOS, here we go. Right, what's changed recently? Yeah, there we go. Latest one, F13, AGESA, blah, 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 for Ryzen 5000 G series. Rad. Cool. Let's have one of those, please. Right, I've got a flash drive here that is FAT32 formatted. I'll just delete that MSI BIOS off of it, which was the last one I was using. Right, that's our flash drive ready to go. Safely eject. There is a specific port that is labeled the BIOS port. However, we don't need that because we're not doing BIOS flash back here. We're just going to do a QFlash from the BIOS config. F8 for QFlash. Let's see. We are going to update the BIOS to F13. Go. Are you sure you want to update the BIOS? Yes. BIOS ID check error. Wah, wah, wah. Oh, I've got an Elite AX V2. Rookie mistake. Can you believe it? I checked I had the right revision and everything, but there's an Elite AX. The AX means it's the Wi-Fi version. And yeah, Wi-Fi version and non-Wi-Fi versions have a different BIOS. Heckin' heck. There are too many damn... It's faster just to Google search. B550 Aorus Elite AX V2. Support. BIOS. There we go. And as you can see, this one is Aorus Elite, and that would be AX, and then they would put V2. However, obviously, they're trying to keep the file name below 8 characters. Right, delete that other one so we don't get confused. And safely eject. F8 again, update BIOS. There we go. Now we've got the updated file visible. Let's try that again. Update. Verifying. That looks more like it. There we go. And as you can see on the left now, we've got the current BIOS version and what we're updating to. And it is quite happy with both the files. Press to start. Updating. There we go. Alright, I'm going to go make a coffee while that progress bar goes across the screen. There we go. And just after a reboot, we're now back into BIOS with BIOS version F13. I lost XMP in the update there, so I'll just turn that back on. And let's save that. And let's just see how quickly that starts back up again. I'll give it 2 reboots to improve, because the first reboot might just be XMP being a little bit screwy. It does that sometimes. There we go. So we've got this thing started up now, and I'm installing Windows on it. And now it's actually booting into an operating system and stuff like that. The post time on there was much more acceptable. So again, it looks like there was an issue. However, did a BIOS update on it, actually started booting it into a system instead of just endlessly trying to reboot into BIOS, and now it's all cleared up nicely. So I'm quite happy with how that's running now, so I'm going to go ahead and stick Windows on there. Right, we've got Windows installed, so I'm going to get connected to the internet, get this thing up to date, and then what I'll do is I'll get, I'm going to stick Steam on here super quick and install a couple of games. It might just be one game. It might just be Doom 2016. I just want to install something on here and just see what these onboard graphics are actually capable of. I haven't actually looked at any of the reviews for this CPU because the graphics performance isn't important for my use case. The fact that we're now running a decent AMD CPU with no graphics card, that's what I needed. But I'm kind of curious as to what this thing is actually capable of. I can kind of hope or believe that this thing can actually pull half-decent gaming performance, like all things considered. So I'll get back to you in a moment when I've done some more installs. Right, we're loading up into Doom 2016 here. I've set it to just medium preset, 1080p medium preset. Let's see what we can do. So I'm aware this isn't, I know Doom Eternal is the current benchmark, but I don't have Doom Eternal. I've still got Doom 2016. You know what? I mean, it's 30 FPS. With a lot of tweaking, we could probably get this up to, I don't know, mid-50s. And I'm sure that there are other websites, you know, Gamers Nexus, etc., who've done an awful lot. Oh yeah, we don't need to reload. I forgot about that. Who've probably done an awful lot more testing and figured out how to actually fine-tune this a bit more. But like, we're on integrated graphics here, man. At 1080p, playing a former AAA title. Yes, it's an older AAA title, but this is not horrific. And there's no graphics card in this computer. This is not bad going. 40 FPS, yeah. More tweaking and we could make this playable. If we drop to 720p, then we'd probably be able to do a reliable 60 there. And if you're on a smaller screen, like a 22 or maybe a 24, 720p is not horrific. Again, keeping in mind, we're talking about budget gaming here. That's what I want to know. Could, like, if someone came in and said, I want a gaming PC and I've got £500, you know, could I put one of these in there and be like, yeah, you're off to the races, you know? That's the thing. And this is, I've played worse. Certainly played on worse. I've certainly played better once upon a time. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to know. I'll do one more test as well. I'm going to install Time Spy, so 3D Mark, and I'm going to run Time Spy. I know that 3D Mark isn't in the testing meta, but I've got 3D Mark scores for graphics cards like a GTX 960 and a 1050 Ti. And if this thing can get anywhere near those graphics cards, that's kind of what I want to know, really. Is running this just as good as like a 960 or a 1050 Ti? Because if it can get close to those, then you're laughing. Look at that, we've got 60 FPS up here. You know, like if I'm not facing the room, that 60 FPS is attainable. It's only when I put a big scene on show. That's when we start tanking the frame rate, when we start putting this on show, you know. It looks better on high graphics, man. Oh well. Anyway, that's kind of interesting. All right, let's bail. Elgato Camlink 4K, people. This thing is bad for testing. Constantly have to deactivate and reactivate it when you're switching resolutions. Right, we have a result. So, that's an arbitrary number. Let's see what it actually compares to. So to put that number into perspective, I've got two scores here from a 1050 Ti 4GB and a 960 2GB. Both these were tested with a 3600, and we had scores of 2492 and 2606 respectively there. What was just the graphics on that if we take the graphics on its own? There we go. Graphics score came in at 2344. And over here, graphics score came in at 1277. So yeah, CPU score was really pushing things up there. So yeah, playing just in Doom, I was playing that and I'm like, this isn't as good as a graphics card. It's better than I expected, but not as good as a graphics card. And running 3D Mark here just confirms that, basically. We're not at the point where integrated graphics will stack up against a graphics card. Because these days, like if you're running anything less than a 960 or a 1050 Ti, you don't really have a graphics card. You have a media card, if you see what I mean. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. I'm aware that there's people out there who don't have access to the super high power stuff we've got over here. You know, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not one of these people who's just like, if you don't have a 3070, you're a nobody kind of thing. Some people don't have good graphics cards, I get it. But again, there's no point in comparing this versus real graphics cards. A real graphics card, even just a 960, which you can probably find for not big money on eBay these days, is still going to destroy the integrated graphics on this CPU. However, that much being said, Doom was playable. I mean, yeah, it's going to need a lot of graphics tweaking, or you're going to have to drop down to low graphics or 720p. But hypothetically, it can do it. It's definitely an improvement over the last time I tried to run games on integrated graphics, which was with a 3400G. That was definitely 720p territory. If you weren't at 720p, it was unplayable. And at 720p, you were looking for 30 frames a second. But in this one, you know, with some tweaking, you could be seeing 60 FPS in high graphics games. But you're going to need to put the work in. That's the thing. So, yeah, definitely a good CPU. Definitely continuing advances in integrated graphics. However, no, this is not a substitute for a graphics card yet. As I mentioned, I've built a gaming PC with integrated graphics only before. I made a video on it as well. I think it was the £300 gaming rig or something like that. However, I did one of those, and it worked, but I haven't done one since. So, you know, make of that what you will. And likewise with this, yes, it would work, but I don't think it's something that I can recommend at this point. However, this build that I've done is something that I can recommend. I like it for a productivity computer, which is what we've built it for. This has not been built for games. It is going to rip most things to shreds. Yes, obviously, you know, 57, 858 and 5900X CPUs are going to be faster, but we've built a lot of power in for a low budget here with lots and lots of headroom for expansion. And it's a really nice computer as well. We're in a really nice case. Everything looks really quality and well built on this. I'm very happy with it as a build. So I hope you guys enjoyed this build I've done here. And just a quick tip of the toes in the water look into the 5600G as a gaming GPU. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. As always, my support links are down in the description below for my Patreon, Discord, and Twitter and Instagram. And also, if you did enjoy this video, hit the like button because that helps a lot. And thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.